Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the ACE Show. I'm David Shoup, for those of you who haven't met me, and I'm going to be your host for today's conversation with Clara, and I'll introduce Clara in just a second. But this is where we help professionals succeed. This is what this ACE Show is about. It's helping professionals succeed both personally and professionally. And this is where I get the chance to interview some of my friends, some experts in their field, or what I like to call aces in their field, and leverage that knowledge to support you all in this ACE community. And so I get the privilege of introducing our guest, Clara. Hi, Clara Smyth. How are you doing?
Hey, David. Great to be here today. Thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this all summer and so glad that we can get this officially done and shared with the community out there.
Yeah, I know it's been, we've been trying to schedule it for, I think a couple months, it seems like. Yeah. So thanks for your flexibility with the scheduling issues and challenges. But for those of you who haven't met Clara or don't know Clara, she is in the competitive intelligence space. She's a director, she's a practitioner, consultant, thought leader. She's been doing this in the competitive intelligence space for over 13 years. And she's hyper focused on turning insights into action, which is what I like. I like, what are the actions that you can take to win more competitive revenue, win more market share, mind share in the industry? She's proud to, from what I understand, you're proud to call yourself a compete geek. Quote,
Yes.
yes, that's right.
I'm so shameless, David. I love what I do. I found my craft really, really early. And although I'm not wearing my geek glasses today, I absolutely am obsessed with understanding what's happening in the market and what companies can do about it, right? To beat the competition. So definitely a self-proclaimed compete geek.
Love it. Love it. Own it. Own it. Graduated from Seton Hall University in diplomacy and international relations, which I can't wait. We'll talk a little bit about that. Past history, some of her other credentials, worked at Slack, Salesforce, Oracle, NetSuite, or worked with and led and scaled market insights for those companies. Navigated lots of industries, right?
Yeah,
From the tech space to ERP, HR tech, I think is what you mentioned.
correct. Yep.
And so you found the niche of the competitive market strategic intel early on in your career. And that's pretty awesome. I can't wait to talk to you a little bit more. I know that you're on a sabbatical right now as you craft your next chapter. So I can't wait to talk a little bit about that. Fun fact for those of you who most of our audience loves to get up and speak in front of people. They just die to do it. They're just like, this is my most favorite thing. I love speaking in front of people, large audiences, and having to memorize presentations. This is what people live for, right? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. She is someone who loves public speaking. I like that because it's someone who teaches presentation coaching techniques. I love that, get people who are fired up about it. And so you've spoken at Salesforce, Dreamforce Conference, SKOs, pavilions, go-to-maker conferences, High Spot, right? Which is where we met, which is what I love. We met at a High Spot Spark conference.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go there, David. Let's talk about our origin story. I would love that. Let's start off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we met, I don't remember if we met, I think we might have just met at the dinner table.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, it
right.
was a gala, right? So we were all dressed up super fancy. And somehow we both decided to sit all the way in the table in the back, right? The cool kids sit in the
That's
back.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. And some through our conversation, we both didn't win. We both didn't we were nominated, but didn't win, which is okay. I'm going to raise my hand, pat myself on the back. It's still
Yeah,
okay.
same here. We showed up. We showed up, David. Next time we'll
We
win.
did. That's right. However, I think we did win because we became friends, and I got to introduce you to my children's book. I brought it out just because you remember this, right?
Absolutely. You pulled it out of your backpack like you were ready to go.
That's right.
And this was not a sales pitch. Like you were not going around and peddling books, David. You were all about your story. And you asked about my nieces. I have three nieces who live in Alaska and they were starting school shortly. And you actually personally sent them a signed copy of Wembley the Pug, your books, like first day of school story. And that was so special that you made a personal, I got to send it to my nieces who were starting school, give them a lot of confidence. And most importantly, like I remember just the amazing, energetic feeling that you brought to the conversation. And I don't remember what else we talked about, but I remember the feeling. And I think for me, that's like such a personal mantra. Like bring your energy, bring your story, own it. And you never know what the universe will have in store for you.
That's awesome. Well, fast forward now, I'm in the final phases of having Wembley the Pug trademarked. It's almost trademarked. You didn't know that, but it's
Congrats.
it's it's gonna be trademarked, which is great. The Adventures of Winnie the Pug. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you. You have a podcast too, which I want to talk to you a little bit about. Maybe
Yeah,
we could do, and how did that come about? And
totally.
so, um, as you listen to this conversation, this is to all of you listening. I would love for you. She's going to bring a fresh perspective, right? She's done things in the marketplace in the competitive intelligence space that is not standard. And so I think she'll offer some really good insights. Keep an open mind. Be willing to take some kind of action if you feel like it's useful. Think about the ideas that we're going to impart, that we're going to share, the strategies that are going to be discussed. How could they be applied to you and your business? How could they be applied to your own brand, your own personal life, and look for ways to improve your business and your personal life? And with that, I'll just turn it over to you, Claire, if you wouldn't mind. Just maybe take a moment and tell us maybe a little bit about how you got to where you are now in this competitive intelligence space, and we'll see how where the conversation goes from there.
Yeah, absolutely, David. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I grew up in New Jersey, so I talk really, really fast. And I always had a competitive edge growing up, right? I was varsity volleyball player, had multiple photography exhibits, top 5% of the class, like that typical type A person.
Gosh,
It was
you're one
that
of
to
those.
me. Yeah, New Jersey for me. But I also realized that one of my magic differentiators as I grew up, through high school and college and in my career was actually putting people first and building relationships. And so when I was in college, I actually had a big failure moment where I was acing all my classes. I had over, 6 or 7 internships. But going to school for international relations and diplomacy, Seton Hall has a dedicated program. Highly recommend it. It's a school like a business school, right? And I realized that my brain just wasn't functioning in a way to be a language master. I couldn't conquer, a couple languages like my fellow students were. And so I was at this crossroads of this was not clicking for me. And I think this is where people's stories get really interesting because the door was closed. I didn't have that competency and I was struggling, right? And these pivot moments in people's career, like what happens when a door closes? What door are you going to open with that? I kind of shifted into tech and I shifted into business and I ended up getting hired for a really hot up and coming HR tech startup in New Jersey. And I commuted 100 miles every day to make that stick and make that work. And I started my career in enterprise marketing. I was tapped to build out their first ever competitive intelligence programs a couple years in. I had an amazing mentor who took a huge risk on me, and I took a huge risk on staying there and building it out. And the rest was kind of history, right? So I was very lucky for people who saw my potential when I didn't see it myself, but I also put in the reps every day, like literally driving down the Jersey Turnpike and the Garden State Parkway
You said 100
100
miles a
miles.
day?
100 miles a day, yeah. And there was some personal things going on with my family that I wanted to kinda stay home and pay off my student loans, right, be really human. I was one of those millennials who moved back home and paid off their student loans and got to build some really important relationships at a critical time of my family, point, but I think overall, it showed me that not only does hard work pay off, but by putting in the reps and being closer to the customers, deeply understanding what your customers are going through actually makes you a more competitively aware person, makes you more competitively stronger company. And then also at the end of the day, you have some really sharp stories that you can pull on from your career that brought you to that point and made you ready to pivot.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd be interested to know what you did in those 100 miles every day. Like, what was going on in that drive? How did you better yourself? Did you just, what was going on in that drive?
Yeah, yeah, so there was a lot of TED Talk listening, there was a lot of NPR, there was a lot of radio station music playing. I I know a lot of, like, old-timey songs, like 90s hits, 80s hits, because I was stuck in the car, right? And I also thought that it was a really deep experience to reflect on my day, right? So currently I work remote, right? And I've been working remote for many years, but by actually having that separation time of when you leave work to decompress and reflect and understand, I should have done that, or maybe I need to thank this person, or maybe I need to apologize for this. That was a personal mantra that I learned through that commute, which was who do I thank? Who do I apologize? And most importantly, how do I pay it forward and raise people up the next day?
Hmm. Yeah, wow, that's great. And so you mentioned you listen to TED Talks, and so who Who were your mentors? Like, who did you talk to? Who were the mentors? Who were the people that you felt like, gosh, this person really impacted some of the decisions I've made in my career, my personal life?
Yeah, so I do have to give a really sincere shout out to a previous boss of mine. His name was Paul Raphael. And Paul and I worked together forming the competitive intelligence function at this HR tech company called iCIMS. And he had this moment of, do I hire Clara, who's a couple years right out of college, knows the industry really, really well, prioritizes, has very strong internal relationships, knows every single seller well, obviously deep with the analyst community, or do I go with a competitive intelligence pro with 20 or 30 years, right, on this candidate's belt? And he actually chose me, right? And that made all the difference in my career, that he saw my potential and he prioritized the internal relationship network that I built up within the company and the trust. And I could
Yeah.
hit the ground running and actually change sales behaviors, tactics, talk tracks, objection handling, right? Because of the trust that was built in there. So I do have to give a big thank you to Paul Raphael. But on a personal note, there was the show that I completely became obsessed with when I was driving up and down the Garden State Parkway, which was called The Moth. And The Moth is a show on NPR where people go on stage and they tell personal stories. And these are not pros. Like, these are not professional storytellers. These are the regular day humans right out there. And I became really interested in what was the concept of telling your story, owning your legacy, and paying it forward. And so I would have these driveway moments where I would arrive back at where I was supposed to go, and I would stay in the car listening to these people's stories of those pivot moments and how they came to where they are today. And these are short; they're less than 5 minutes. And The Moth has a podcast currently right on NPR. And then personally, it really came full circle, David, where when I moved to Denver a couple years back, I was able to join a Moth event live. So the Moth
Ah,
has tons of events, right? You can Google it. There's tons of events all throughout America. So you can go and attend and then throw your name in the hat to speak. And so I threw my name in the hat to speak, and I ended up telling a really personal story of mine in front of 200 strangers. And that was a really special moment of how it came full circle from just being a listener to being an active participant and growing a community.
oh, wow, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's cool.
And I
That's
promise they're not paying me for this. I'm just a huge, huge storyteller by trade. And I think it has a lot of power to pay it forward, to share your story with people and allow them to feel connected, that they're not alone in terms of their struggles and what they go through as a human being every day.
yeah, that makes me think of when I was, younger, I listened to a guy by the name of Zig Ziglar, and at some point I was like, I wanna meet him. And, like, fast forward 20 years later after, life happens, and I happened to go to a seminar and I got to meet him, one of my mentors, which was just a wild experience. So this whole moth thing is pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Any others that you think about as far as mentors or
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm big into the self help space. I'm also big into understanding yourself better so that you can elevate others, right? Filling your own cup is super, super important. Protecting your energy, investing in yourself, taking care of yourself, going to the gym, all of those mindful type activities so you can show up stronger to others, right? So to make the most of a current moment, you have to be preparing for that moment, right? In the months and weeks leading up to that, whether personally or professionally, right? So, a couple people that I listen to day in and day out, Simon Sinek, I know he's very, very famous. He has the book Start With Why, and he actually has a podcast show called A Little Bit of Optimism. And he's very much a realist. So this is not a pie in the sky type podcast. But the one that I was listening to most recently was enjoying and going through the process, not just waiting for the ending. Right. So that one is something that I'm, living right now during my career sabbatical, which is enjoying the process and not being fixated on the exact ROI or output as you kind of go through and create your own path there. I'm a huge fan of Mel Robbins, right? She recently became really famous
mm,
and was around the let them theory, right? So kind of letting go of how to control people, expectations that they might have of you, and how to change people and how you can let them and embrace them. And most importantly, hold your boundaries at the same time, professionally and personally. And then Dan Harris, he has this podcast called 10% Happier, which is like, we all want to be happier, right? But to change our life overnight is really hard. So like, what would a 10% change look like? So huge fan of those three thought leaders in the space.
that's good. See, there's a theme running in what you're talking about. A lot of these people you are mentioning are really good storytellers, right? They craft great stories and they have a great message. It seems like that is a big thing for you is what's your story and in your story so far, it's just been really great. Um, let's maybe pivot. Let's just pivot.
Yeah, let's
Let's
do it.
because we talked about competitive intelligence in your introduction, and maybe tell us a little bit more about what is competitive intelligence. Because I mean, just so you know, not everybody on this podcast or this show, they maybe people don't even know really what that is. So maybe let's start with that. What is competitive intelligence really? What is it all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a niche, totally, right? But it's something that every single person does on a daily basis. You go shopping, you have to choose between Fritos or Doritos, right? You have to choose between low fat or full milk, right? And these are the choices that we make as a consumer every day. And same thing as a buyer or a prospect evaluating software or whatever their business decision is why should I go with you versus the competition versus alternatives? What makes you different, David?
Mhm.
What is your edge? And competitive intelligence is that function to understand the data, the intel, and the insights to change action internally, right? So, by understanding your market, what your competitors are doing, pricing, packaging, new product update, right? All of those things that happen each and every day, the question is, well, what do we do about it? And that's where competitive intelligence comes in.
Uh-huh.
And on a daily basis, every employee is collecting or monitoring or understanding or talking to their customers. And so the employees of every organization are in the trenches, they're in the front line understanding where is the market going and what is the competition going to market with, right? And so it's something that everybody experiences every day, but I'm very much a advocate of creating a function out of it when you invest in competitive intelligence, when you have a leader like me, regardless of where it sits within the organization, you have somebody to own insights and take action from it and influence change. Because if you can be faster, more agile, and quicker to market than your competition, that is the standard. If you can be closer to your customers than your competitors are, you're listening and you're learning and you're taking action faster than they are. And you can win more mind share, more revenue, and most importantly, be the leaders in your market. So for me, competitive intelligence is how can you understand your customers better than your competitors and do something.
I always pictured it just being in the tech space. Just, I always, I that's when I first heard the term competitive intelligence when I was at Tableau, and even more detail when I switched from Salesforce to then Gong. Gong, I was more involved in the idea of what competitive intelligence is. So I always associate it just with like SaaS companies. But you're saying Doritos and Frito Lay, there's competitive intelligence for that. Oreo cookies and Fig Newtons.
Absolutely, right? When you walk into the grocery store, or if you're a buyer and you walk into a software purchase, right? You have to choose, do I spend $2 extra on Oreo, or do I get the generic knockoff brand or Oreo for $2 versus $5, right? Do I have a brand affinity, right? Do I have a price affinity? Maybe there's a community of Oreo lovers, right, that I can join, right? So obviously making this really, really simple. But when you think about differentiation, David, it's price, it's product, it's service, and it's community, right? If I'm somebody buying an Oreo or buying Gong, for example, is my career going to be proofed out because of that? Am I going to look better personally? Am I going to be taking the risk out of this decision because of that brand? Most importantly, is the product going to fit the needs and the
Mhm.
customization that I want for my use cases?
Yeah, I would usually say, is what you're going to share going to help them? Someone's when they're thinking about making a decision about buying a product or a service, is that product going to make me better, faster, smarter, more efficient? Is it going to save me time? Is it going to help me make a good decision so I get a promotion? Is it going to help me make a smart decision so I don't get fired? And so when they're buying a competitive intelligence product, like a software product to join, their platform, uh, they're making a decision between 3 or 4 or 5 different ones, and one's gonna cost more, but one's gonna have more features, one's gonna have how do they make that decision? How do you help someone make that kind of decision? How do you make sure that people choose you? Is there more to it? I imagine there's more to it.
Absolutely. I mentioned a couple of those differentiation pillars, right? Price, product, service, community. These are all ways that you can answer the question, this is how I'm different, David. But for that to land, you have to understand the customer better, right, than the competition. And I think this plays out every single day in sales conversations. So, a big part of competitive intelligence is something called competitive enablement, which is how do you support sellers to have the right competitive pitch, to objection handling when they say, I'm actually going to go with Gong instead of Clary. What does your seller say in that exact moment? And so, I think competitive insights can be used across many departments. The quickest ROI is to support sales behavior change so they can close more competitive revenue. That is the biggest, quickest ROI, the tactical thing to do so that you're in the field with your sellers, with your solution engineers, with your CSMs, so they can protect your customer base and obviously win more customers too.
Mhm.
So that's kind of high level. But to answer your question, it comes down to the everyday conversation. It comes down to making sure you understand how your company is different, understanding your competitive tone. So there's a lot of mudslinging when it comes to competitive selling and very expensive purchasing decision, right? Where, you take two companies, you take Gong and Clary, and maybe Clary's bad mouthing Gong, or maybe Gong's bad mouthing Clary. Whatever the case is, everybody knows when that goes south. I mean, you walk into a car dealership and they're bad talking the other car dealership down the street. Oh yeah, that car is bad, like terrible engine, this or that,
And
right?
Fig Newton's like, our what we put inside our cookies is definitely more valuable than the white goo that's in the Oreo
Yeah,
cookies.
yeah, 100%, 100%, right? So everybody's bad talking each other, but at the end of the day, the customer's like, "This is not gonna help me make my decision. I need a champion deck. I need you to understand my needs better, and most importantly, I need you to make me look good."
Mhm.
And make it about them. What's in it for me, right? What's in it for the customer? And so there's that personal edge. Obviously, there's the product edge. And most importantly, there's the customer experience edge of it.
Yeah.
But
You
to answer your
mentioned
question, every company has a different competitive tone, David. And
yeah.
that's really what we're talking about. How do you compete? What do you say? And what behavior, right, through sales enablement can compete and sales enablement work together to actually change a rep's behavior and make them look as sharp and as empathetic as possible when they're doing the sale.
It's funny you say that because you had mentioned, and I think in our conversations and a little document that we had sent back and forth, you said something about your mantras,
Yeah.
right? I think
Yeah.
the mantras about being curious and asking one more question, I
Yes.
think can be really valuable in helping a customer or, when I'm teaching enablement people to ask that one more question or really be curious rather than bad mouthing that company. Go, well, what made your decision? What's spurring you to kind of maybe lean towards this product versus ours? Like, be curious. I
Totally.
mean, how does that fit?
Oh, it fits perfectly, David, because at the end of the day, the average tech win rate, right? Or you take any competitive sale, that win rate is between 20 to 25%, right? And I've seen that across many, many companies. So you're losing a lot more deals than you are winning, right? That is the elephant in the room. And so whoever's running the sale, their attitude is, what can I learn from you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, regardless of how this sale goes, right? And this introduces the concept of win loss intelligence and win loss analysis, and really making sure that you are only going to lose if you don't understand the lessons. Even if you didn't win that revenue, how can you take that opportunity to learn from the customer, put that into action so you don't lose the next deal?
Oh, yeah, that's great. I feel like what you're sharing is not just it's not just for someone in the competitive intelligence space. Like, you're giving advice for someone who's selling up any kind of product or service or idea or concept. Do you have kind of any advice that you'd give to someone who's really like, how do I sell my services or myself more effectively? Uh, does that make sense?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, and I think we've been, talking about this a lot, which is like know your story, right? Try to define your differentiation. And you can prove that out. You can test that. It doesn't always have to be right 100% of the time because you can go to market and test that. But have a V1 of your differentiation pitch, right? Why should you hire me, David, versus Clara 2.0, right? Like, what is my differentiation pitch when I'm a candidate? And this plays out when every single person in the world is trying to get a job too. Whether this is in the software, whether you're a consultant, whether you're, applying for a job, or when you're trying to win that next business that comes up. I do think it's like knowing your story, understanding your differentiation, and most importantly, leaving the relationship door open to learning, right? Because like I said, the 20% win rate, or, there's thousands of other candidates applying to your same job. Really be curious. hey, what am I missing? Hey, what are my blind spots? And most importantly, I'm here for professional development and I'd love to stay in touch,
Well,
right? And
yeah.
actually staying in touch is so, so important because people want to see your progress, right? And most importantly, those pivot moments, right? When one door closes, what can you learn so that you can walk through the next door faster, more intelligent, and understanding yourself better?
You cold applied, you said, to Slack,
I
right?
did. Yeah.
And 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 you were chosen out of a couple thousand candidates. You were the one chosen. What happened there? How did that happen? How did you differentiate yourself there?
It was super tricky, and it's a wild story, David. I think this was an incredible moment. Forever grateful for the chances that those people in the hiring process, took on me. But most importantly, I also led with my own story and my own differentiation. And I built out a really strong community of people who could vet for me and be there for me as well. And so even if I didn't get the job, I had tighter relationships coming out of it. I was more connected to my network and I had proofed out that presentation 20 times over to some of the best people in the industry. So I think to go through the process, and even if I didn't get that job, again, was leaving more connected, more aware of myself, and I had a sharper edge. But
Mm,
to answer your question, I did cold apply to the Slack opportunities, one of the once in a lifetime opportunities that you couldn't not throw your, hat in the ring. And a lot of people disqualify themselves out of fear, right? I could have been like, oh yeah, Slack's never going to pick me, right? I'll just disqualify myself and save my time and not apply. I could have done that, but I threw my hat in the ring and I wanted to see, what would happen next. And so just like any other interviewing process, I think understanding the market, the competitors critically important. And then I also had experience competing against Microsoft, right, during my NetSuite days. And so to understand how do you compete against a full suite player, market behemoth, was really important when I was interviewing with Slack too. And
mhm.
then also the network that I brought to the table, like knowing that your network and your LinkedIn presence is a big differentiator for yourself. And I got on every stage that I could have. So I showed up in all the Google searches, right? And now showing up in ChatGPT as a top battle card expert, that's super important too. So that that you're elevating them and they're elevating you alongside it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You, this is like, to get to Tableau for me, I had to go through 32 interviews,
Wild.
5 different job applications. You think, "God, why wouldn't you have give up?" But I really wanted to work there because I just relate to what you just said in one way because I kept connecting with people throughout the whole interview. So when that first interview and that first job application didn't go through, I was not immediately kind of out of the loop for Tableau. They thought they liked me and had connected well enough that when another opportunity came up for a role, I was able to connect again. And then same thing happened 4 more times before I finally got the job that was perfect. That's just about community. That's about the people that you connect with. It's about how do you maintain good relationships, I think in the long run will really help you. You have a Rolodex of people that you connect, and you have a really good way that you handle with like how do you maintain good relationships? And you mentioned something about a three-way LinkedIn, like connecting through
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. So just like you said, David, you're going to get more no's in life than you're going to get a yes, right? Like our win rate example, right? Or the job application example. I've been very, very lucky with my own journey. I always want to pay it forward to others. So we all have had moments in our career where, recruiters are in our LinkedIn inbox, right? They're sending us notifications based on the Tableau brand, right? Based on the Slack brand. And I always say, thank you so much for the consideration. Can I connect you with somebody I know who's interested, right? And through my time at Clue, connecting with hundreds and hundreds of competitive programs in the world, some of the best brands you can notice, and then also through my network, I always say yes and yes, I would be interested, but I think this person, would be better fitting. So yes, three-way LinkedIn message. I'll connect the recruiter directly with somebody I would refer and then kind of send them off. And worst case, they're connected. Best case, maybe they get hired. So kind of being a little bit of a headhunter in my own based on my network and connecting the dots and making sure to pay it forward in the industry. But yeah, I think to what you said before, David, around storytelling and knowing your edge and most importantly, building your own brand through every part of the interview cycle. My mantra has always been tell them something they don't know. Right. There was an interview process that I went through a couple of years ago, and they ended up actually closing the role. So they didn't hire anybody. but I kept that door open and I always told them something that they didn't know about their competition, right? About the role, about a new framework I created, about a post, like whatever the case is, you have a story and you have an edge, and you can always tell somebody something that they don't know.
Yeah. Oh gosh. When's your book coming out? You should have a
When's
book.
my book? Yeah.
When's the Clara Smyth book coming out?
Uh, yeah, brashly, I've heard that more often than not. But yeah, I gotta put pen to paper around that. And David, I think like we are at such a unique spot in history of time. I'll just get really theoretical here, but yeah, there's like such an interesting point that has converged that we have a platform like none of our previous family members or ancestors ever had in our life, right? And I owe it to them. I owe it to my story. I owe it to the mentors that have invested in me to take that. And whether that's one LinkedIn post a week or maybe one book a year, right? Or maybe a children's book for you, David, I do think that we have this unprecedented platform to own the tone and own our differentiation. And most importantly, raise people up along the way, right? And connect the dots so that people can get from A to B faster versus you taking time to go A to Z and then all the zigzags, right, in your life. So if I could make it easier for the next person, I'd write that book any day.
Hopefully if you hadn't thought about writing one, this one sticks in your head. Is there anything that you do um outside of kind of the like what hobbies do you have? Or do you have any kind of, or is it like literally competitive intelligence is my world?
No. Yeah, I think there was a part of my career that I was definitely like that. We all go through chapters of our,
Yeah.
of our life and of our career where we're like super in it. I think right now being on my career sabbatical, it's actually allowed me to get more into my hobbies. I know that sounds very corny, but I've definitely been really interested throughout my whole life doing photography. So, kind of chase every sunset that's out there, every, mountain high, right? And understanding,
Well, in
what's out there.
Colorado,
Yeah.
you've got endless supplies of beautiful photography, I bet.
Yeah, so that's an endless hobby. It will always go on, and I think most importantly, like, sharing it with people, putting it on the wall, posting it, whatever the case is, right? Sharing your perspective is something that I obviously do in my work life and then, through photography as well. So that's gonna be a forever hobby for me. I absolutely love to travel, so I'm very much like, book the trip and then figure it out, right? You
Ah,
don't have to have a perfect agenda, and that's I'm very not type A anymore when it comes to travel and experiencing the world, just like we met David, right? Walk up to that table, walk up to that stranger, and you never know, what'll happen next. So when I was really young, for some reason, for whatever reason, you have these things in your life that you really hold on to. And one of the things that I held on to is I want to be able to talk with anybody, anywhere, right, at any moment. And so I have all these kind of micro stories. Most recently, I was at an airport and a guy sat next to me. It's kind of, older stage in his life, and we ended up talking about how his grandmother, is now over 100, years old, and her learnings from life and her story, and how he's bringing a bunch of roses right on the airplane in his check-in suitcase, right? So it was really fascinating. And then he ended up sending me a book of his poems, right? So I think like moments like that where you have no expectation and just want to understand somebody can lead to like little moments in joy afterwards. So yeah, now I'm reading his poem book and maybe writing some more poems one day too.
oh, that's fantastic. I think I know a little bit more direction on what your book's gonna be about, your first one. It should be about what's your story, crafting your
Yeah,
story.
crafting your story, definitely.
Go
But
for it.
but
Touch
yeah,
blue,
but
make it true.
additionally,
It's
like,
happened.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I also love cooking. I'm a shameless cook. I do a lot of like instant pot cooks and Instagram story, recipes where you're combining different food cuisines and genres. So I love that. And then additionally, I've done triathlons, competitive, runner, and definitely make sure to work on, your body to process everything that's going on in your daily life to make those inspirations. Right? You never know where something's going to break through, and I think getting out of your mind, especially when we work in tech each and every day, looking at screens, for 8 hours, a day. I just want to go outside and hug a tree as well. So that's a little bit about me, what I do in my free time: travel, connect with people, do some races, and then sprinkle in some good food as well.
Okay, now I'm gonna say, well, where do you find time to work with all that other stuff you're doing?
Well, I obviously work on my paddleboard in the middle of the reservoirs of
Oh,
Colorado, right, David? It's like checking all the boxes.
that's right, right.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. Well, is there any last thoughts that you have? I'd love to I mean, you have some more mantras that you shared. I know that, being curious is one that you actually you've got a whole list of mantras. Understand their why is another thing that you
Yeah.
talk about, but that might be more towards the competitive mental. And then there's one that you talk about is live in the awkward pause.
Mhm.
Tell me more about that. Live in the
Yes.
awkward. What does that mean to you? Because I have an idea of what it means to me, but what does that mean to you?
So I definitely wanna hear your version too, David. I think with the awkward pause, you can take this in a couple ways. I think as humans, like, we don't want there to be an awkward pause. So somebody wants to talk, right? So by embracing the awkward pause, you're actually encouraging the person to speak, right? So instead of saying, like, this is my take, this is what I have to say, you're encouraging the space for them to actually double down on a thought. So you'll probably see this in your everyday conversations. Well, you'll be talking with somebody and then they'll pause for like 2 seconds and then they'll keep going, right? And this keep going piece is the most interesting part that comes out of conversations because that's where their thinking and their riffing and their genius kind of comes out when they feel really, really comfortable. So, one, it's critical to understanding people. Two, from a CI perspective or competitive intelligence perspective, you get to learn more from them or get more information out of them, right? And I know that sounds very much of like a spy mentality, but I do think it's important to see, what is said in that awkward pause. And then, lastly, I think it's also important to just reflect on the conversation and be comfortable with people instead of just doing small talk and walking away and being like, that was a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think our natural inclination is to want to fill the space with something. If there's quiet or if there's someone's processing a thought. In if I ask a question of a customer or a client that I'm working with, and there's that awkward pause, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that they're pausing. And if I interrupt whatever's going on, I will throw off their pause. So I need to be okay with silence
Yeah.
and that awkward pause when I ask a question to a customer or I'm doing a training and I say, I'd love to get your feedback here. What's your thought, team? And we'd do an exercise, and I used to do this. I would ask a question, and I literally hit the timer. And it was a question I knew that I was going to teach the point about being okay with silence. That was and it's amazing. I mean, people would. I had an awkward pause there. People would get itchy. Oh, I would ask for a volunteer. That's right. I'd ask for a volunteer to come up and deliver their presentation. And there was just this silence as people were thinking. And there was this one person who was thinking, I know they're going, I think I want to do it. This is going on in their mind. And if I would have just cut him off before and I want to do it, I think I should do it. I think I should do it, but maybe somebody else will do it. I don't want to, I'm really nervous. And they go, oh, fine, I'll do it in their mind. That's all happening in their mind, right? But if I cut him off, that person who was really thinking about it was missing that opportunity. So that's where that awkward pause goes in. And you ask a question uh, and wait for a response. And so in
Hmm.
sales, if I ask a question, how does that look? Or if I'm getting in the closing process and I say, I just need your address so I can send you that information. When I was selling books, I go, I need your address so I could send that information for your books. And I would just sit and I'd let them think about, are they actually going to buy this or not? They give me all the buying signs, yes, but then there's that final moment. But if I would have said, I need your address, it's because I'm going to send you the book. I'm going to send you the books, and then and you're going to love the books. They're going to love them. You're going to, and so instead I just say pause and I'm going to look and I give them a chance to think. And there's an awkward pause there. That's the two things that come to mind for me.
Oh, 100%. I love that story, Dave, because to your point, you're creating space for someone else to fill. Right? And so you're creating space for them to say yes, to say no, to share their own objections, right? And I know that we've ironically been cutting each other off because we're so excited, right, around this podcast. But to your point, like in sales conversations, in family conversations, in work conversations, and therapy conversations, right, in any type of person to person conversation, the other person just wants to be heard. You might not agree with them, you might not understand them 100% of the time, but to show up and be intentional about creating that pause, creating that moment for them to share their needs, share their software issues. By the way, David, I'm actually looking at your competitor. they wouldn't be saying that if you're just doing your sales pitch and your demo and trying to hit all the check boxes on your, on your perfect demo checklist, right? So I do think like the awkward pause can be applied to any part of your life, any relationship that you have, where you create space for somebody to share and have them tell you something that you don't know.
Yeah, when you're talking, you're not selling, and you're right. I mean, in sales situations, if you're the one talking, then they need to talk. They need to share their story. They need to share
Yeah,
their experience, and that awkward
absolutely.
pause really helps make that happen. That was a dramatic moment. I just added the
It
awkward pause there.
was, it was, yeah, we're creating all the awkward pauses today, I
Yep.
absolutely love it. It's super meta, and even if you don't do awkward pauses, so often, if you just put one in a conversation, don't make this awkward, super, super awkward, right? But I think just by planting one in a conversation, you'll learn more than you were expecting, and then I've also seen this done, in the world of competitive intelligence and win-loss. I used to run my own win-loss interviews when I was at NetSuite, where I pick up the phone and talk to people who did not choose NetSuite, right? They said, "We went with Microsoft, we went with, SAP, like whatever the competitor was." And to just say, "Hey, I want to learn from you. This is no strings attached, right? Like we respect your decision." And there was times where I would be on the phone for an hour, hour and a half, frantically taking notes, right, as fast as possible. Obviously, recording the call if it was their permission and pausing as much as possible because they ended up sharing about their needs, their evaluation process, who they looked at, what dirt was thrown, by certain salespeople or not, right? What was their experience? And at the end of the day, you can take those insights and you don't really lose anymore, right? You can actually put those into action. And so you can do this in every single sales process, which is, hey, what drove your decision forward and how can we win your business better next time?
That's cool. Ah,
Yeah.
great, great chat. This has been fun.
It has been fun. Yeah. I have one more mantra, David, if you
Yeah, I
don't
would love. I
mind
was gonna.
me
This is a
sharing
good
it.
chance. Is there one last thing you'd like to share before I kind of wrap up and we figure out how people can reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that I have been recently testing in my life is don't make decisions out of fear, right? And so a lot of times people think of something, hey, I'm going to post on LinkedIn, or hey, I'm going to call this person, or hey, I'm going to apply for that job, or hey, maybe I'm going to make that phone call, right? And then they psych themselves out. Oh, this is probably going to happen, or the person is not going to pick up, or I'll never get that job, or yeah, this competitor's going to win the deal. But by choosing to make the decision anyway and not be locked down by your fear is
Mm,
so critically important. And I think for us to be fearless, worst case, we'll lose and we'll learn something, right? Best case, like in my Slack example, you get the job, right? And you put yourself out there and you understand your differentiation more, right? In the workplace or in your own story or in your own life. And I think like, when you approach it that way, not to make decisions out of fear, it allows you to take back your power as well. And it allows you to tap into meeting people like you, David, right? Like we could have sat at that high spot spark table and not talked at all. Oh, maybe he doesn't like me or whatever the case is, right? But I think to not make decisions out of fear and go to that event, take that call, pay it forward, make that LinkedIn three-way connection. Yeah, just allows you to create your own tone as a human being and pay it forward and see where, the path might take you.
I hear it. This is great. I hear it as feel the fear. It's okay to feel fear, but do it anyways. Do what you know is right, or what your heart's telling you you should do. I should do that, but I'm so nervous. But I should do it. I'm gonna do it. I'll do it. Feel the fear and do it anyways.
Yeah, and you're never gonna be perfect. A lot of times people are like, "Oh, well,
What?
maybe if I get 1,000 likes on this post, then I'll post this post, right? Because I'll get the affirmation or the validation, right? Or maybe after this certification or after this AI course, for example, then I'll feel more confident." But it's embracing the process and showing up anyway, even if you're not perfect, because you're gonna be changed and transformed in a good way, and you never know who you're gonna meet along the way. So that would be my inspirational, mantra for today, David, is show up anyway, act anyway out of fear, pay it forward, and then most importantly, know your story and begin to craft your differentiation and test that every day.
Thank you for that. How do people
Thank you,
reach out to
David.
you? How do people connect
Yeah.
with you if they want? What's the best way? What do you say?
Best way, David, would be find me on LinkedIn. I'm Clara Smyth with a Y. So that's my differentiation, right? People will remember me because of that.
You might say
Very
Smythe, but it's Smith.
No, It's Smith, yep. Very open to coffee chats and understanding people's story and how they got there and you know, what magic we can do potentially through collaboration or working together. And here to geek out about competitive intelligence anytime. David, I have one last question for you, if you
For
don't mind
me,
me
oh my gosh.
jumping in. Yeah, yeah. So
Sure,
I'd
sure.
love to hear from you, you know, through creating this podcast and this community, how has it changed you and what have you learned through it?
Oh, well, I one of the things I love to do is I I love the idea of helping celebrate other people and to build other people up and help introduce other people to my friends and the people I care about. And this is one way to do that. Everybody that's so far been on my podcast are people that I know really well, people that are close friends that I think have some expertise or value that I think would be really wonderful for more people to hear. And so for me, I love the idea of helping, like a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, it's just about helping others to succeed. And I think, you know, Zig Ziglar has a great quote that I typically open with is like, you can have everything you want in a life if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. Am I perfect? No, but I sure like to help other people succeed, and I help, uh, and it's helped me in my life to succeed as well. So that's what comes to mind. That's why I do this. Ace show too is it just sounds like cool. It's an ace show, right?
It
It's the ace.
does, it
We're gonna
does.
talk to a
Play
bunch
the
of
ace, right?
aces,
Yeah, we're
right?
talking the aces, we're playing the aces. Yeah, absolutely. We're winning the game together 100%.
Yeah.
David, thank you so much for having me. This has been incredibly refreshing. I appreciate the space to have the awkward pause, to tell my story, to talk about those pivot moments, and most importantly, create that sense of community and pay it forward to people. So appreciate you, David. Thank you again for the opportunity and can't wait to be in touch.
Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna end it on that. Thank you so much. If you got to reach out to Clara, reach out to her via LinkedIn, and stay tuned for our next Ace show.